Hello guys, good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so let's kick off the class. So today we're going to be talking about authentication. All right, in Node.js. Okay, so how do we handle protected routes? All right, so there are two, basically, in terms of authentication, right? There are two types of routes you would have in your app. One of them would be an open route that anybody can visit, right? Unprotected. And then the other one would be a protected route. Okay. So the topic of authentication in Node.js happens to be really, how would I put it? It gets really complex for beginners. And then there are many ways you can do authentication, right? With their pros and cons. But we're going to talk about like the very basic kind of authentication today. And finally, during the next class, we're going to wrap it up with maybe some of those other types, session with cookies, and then if we have time, talk about OAuth, all right, which is like one of the toughest that beginners tend to struggle with. So if we have time, we'll deal with it next class, during the next class. All right. So let's begin. Okay. So I'm going to use my terminal today to do some stuff so that at least we are aware that you can actually use your terminal, all right, for some of these tasks. Okay, so what do we need for today's class? We need Mongoose, we need bcrypt, we need JWT token. Bcrypt and JWT token are I would say they are the new packages that you'll be working with. All right. The other ones you're already familiar with: Express, Mongoose, .m or .env. Already familiar with them. So let's get the ball rolling. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is, and you should do when you visit a terminal, if you don't know your way around the terminal, all right, you have to always be alert, all right, as to where you are on your system. So with the terminal, the way you know where you are is by looking at this path of it, all right? So look at this part of it, it tells you where you are, all right? Currently, it's saying that I'm in the root directory of my hard disk, all right? If you happen to use the Finder, or if you're on Windows, the Explorer, you see things graphically, right? So you can tell where you are. Currently, I know I'm in recent.
I don't know if it's just me. I can't see.
Oh, okay. I shared it. So I don't know when it went off again. All right, let's do that now. Um, okay, coming up in 2, 3, 1, action. All right, can you see now?
Yes, yes.
Yes, you can.
All right, great. So how you determine your location on the terminal is by looking at this part of the terminal. All right, currently this is letting me know that I'm in a base directory. All right, but this more importantly tells me that I'm in the base or root directory of my hard disk. All right, it's like the first place you enter when you enter into a house. Okay, like the root. All right, so that's where I am. So from there, I can navigate my way through the hard disk. If you are making use of the Finder or for Windows guys, the Explorer, you would be able to see things graphically, right? You can see that you are well on recent. You can click on applications, you can go to documents, downloads. All right, you know where you are because this is a graphical interface. But with the terminal, right, you have to look at this place. Okay, so if you happen to be anywhere else, so documents, you are in documents currently, so this tells me that I'm in a documents directory. All right, and I want to go back home. All I need to do is cd tilde, right? This is the tilde symbol. You find it before 1 on your keyboard. All right, so you have to press shift, that's backtick key to get tilde. So if you just say cd like that, tilde, it takes you to the root of the project. All right. So what I'm about to do is actually go to desktop. And if you don't know your way around, this is a very good command that you should know about. ls. ls means list. Is like show the list of the content of the directory. All right. So if I press enter, you can see everything we have in this directory. So within this directory, we have application, we have every guy you see here, profile, and so I know where I can go from there. All right. So I can say cd documents. All right, and enter. I can now get to document because document is here. All right, but if I try to cd, so let's go back to the root. If I try to cd into any folder that's not here, I'll get an error. So if I say cd zoom ma, it says no such file or directory. So it has to be in that current directory where you are in, all right? So enough of that. So I'm going to go to the desktop because I know I can go to the desktop from there. With terminal is smart enough to know that I'm trying to cd into desktop, even without typing the cd command. But for most of you guys, you need to type the cd command. So let me just put it there, cd desktop. Now on the desktop, that is where I want to create my project folder. All right, so I'm going to say make directory authentication demo. So if I ls now, you can now see that we have that folder in the desktop or on the desktop. All right. So the next thing I have to do is to check in, that's change directory into authentication demo. Okay. And now I'm inside that folder. So we know what we always do, npm init-y to initialize your node project. All right. Initialize that folder as a node project. Okay. So there you go. So our file has been created, which is the package.json file. If I press ls, you see that we have that package.json content in there. Okay. I can do a lot from here, but at this point, I'll go to my VS Code, all right, because the other things. Okay, I'll just go to VS Code so that the class is easier for everyone. So what I can do is from my terminal, I can type code dot. So if I say code dot, it's going to open VS Code, which is my default code editor. It's going to open VS Code. I think this command is specific for VS Code, I think. So when you see code dot, it means open VS Code in this directory. So it simply means open this directory in VS Code. That's what it means. Dot, your current directory. I'm going to say code dot, and then it opens VS Code with my project. All right, so it has opened my project in VS Code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this. Can you see the VS Code window? Let me confirm.
No,
No.
not yet.
No. Is that what?
No,
No,
we can't see the VS Code.
Okay. Hold on. No share. Yeah. Can you see it now?
Yes.
All right. So we now have VS Code open. So next thing we want to do now is to create our project folders and files. But first, let's all right, first let's open the terminal here because we also need our terminal. So just go to the menu bar. All right, you see terminal and click on new terminal. All right, that opens up the terminal here. So you can run your commands here. All right, so what we want to do now is to first of all edit this package.json file. All right, so our main, that's our entry point, which is main. We're going to turn it to server.js because this will be the name of our server file. All right, and then we're not running tests, so I'll get rid of this and I'll add a start script that says node server.js. All right, and then a watch script like I love to do, and that would be node mon server.js. Okay, for node monitor. So having done that, I think we're good. All right, so now I'm going to create my .env file. And I know I will have need of my Mongo URI. I know that I have need of my ports. I know that I have need of my JWT secret. So I'm going to explain what this does when we make use of it. Okay. So I'm going to save that. And now that that is done, let us install all the packages that we need. npm I, we need Express, right? We need Mongoose, we need bcrypt, all right? We need JSON web token, and we need .env. Okay. So you can install all this as you go. We give it time to install, and there you go. So I've installed all of them. So if you check your package.json, you are going to find them here in our dependencies. So now we have need of one dev dependency, and that's nodemon. Okay, so I'm going to say npm I nodemon -- save dev. Okay, nodemon. I hope that's correct. All right, so we have nodemon installed. So we know that we can start our server, but not really, because we need to create our server file. All right, but let's leave that for later. So before we do that, we're going to create our folder structure, and I want to do this from my terminal instead of clicking and stuff like that. The terminal makes it very easy for me. So I'm going to do make directory mkdir make directory -p src / and then a list of subdirectories under SRC. Okay, so I want DB, I want middlewares, I want, so no space, no space. So without the spaces, right? I want controllers, I want models, and I want routes. I hope I spelled that correctly. All right, so why we needed this P flag is to say that if the parent is not already existing, create it. All right, so if there's no SRC in this project, right, SRC is going to be created and all these subfolders are going to be created inside of it. So if I press enter, check it out. We have our SRC file folder and all the subfolders inside of it. How cool is that? Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to start creating my files. So today I'm not going to be starting with server.js. I'm going to be starting from top to bottom because I actually know, I have a structure of what I want in my mind. So it's not necessary for me to start with server.js. All right, so let's go. So what do I want? First of all, we know that we want a database, all right, or we need a database. Okay, that's like the first thing. And we need a way to connect to it, right? So I'm going to create my connect db.js. All right, so all these repetitions are very, very, very intentional so that when you do it multiple times, it becomes very, easy for you to remember. All right. So is going to be an asynchronous function. All right. And then this is where we do our try and catch block. The reason why we do try and catch with asynchronous functions, especially when we are connecting to a remote server, is because if your request fails, you are required to catch that error. Okay. So usually, let me show you something for those who do not know how this works. So usually we won't use async await. What we'll do is, okay, because this is a promise-based API. So we're going to say mongoose.connect. In case you see the syntax anywhere, all right, you wouldn't see it as magic. So we're going to say mongoose.connect, and then we connect to process.env.mongo URI. So that .env package that we installed, this guy .env, when we configure it in the server, what it's going to do for us is that it's going to look in a file called .env, which is .env, all right? And it's going to take all the variables that we have there and put it inside process.env. So that's what that .env package does for us. You can even write something like that with what we have learned so far. You can write a package like that. Although yours might not be as optimal, but then you get the idea. So what it does is that it's going to look in the directory, look for a file. Somebody can try that out, all right, as a challenge. It looks in the directory of the project, check for .env file, all right. Takes everything before the equal to sign, all right, of each line, all right. It takes each line, everything before the equal to sign. So you can split each line and take the left-hand side. I think so, yeah. And then those are the variables. And then you convert it to an object. Every line, convert it to an object. And then you attach it to process.env. Process.env is available. To add something to process.env, you can just say it's globally available. You can just say process.env dot, say, rema equals this object. You have added something called rema in process.env. All right, so that's what .env is doing for us. All right, quite a very useful package. So that's why it has so much downloads. Okay, so now that we have the URL here, we'll connect to Mongoose, but then we'll say then. All right, so if there's a success, we get the response, and then we can do something with the response, whatever I want to do. All right, to do with the response. And then if there's a failure, so let me just return the request. If there's a failure, we catch. Okay, so this is how you would handle a promise usually. Okay, you catch the error, and then do whatever you want to do with that error. This is how we would have done. This is what we would have done, all right? But then it's usually very more cleaner and it feels more, I would say native, right? When you use as async await, because you write code the way you know how to write codes, all right? And it follows the normal flow of how a program should run from top to bottom, all right? Instead of chaining and stuff like that. So usually you will see async await syntax. But when you use async and await, right, you need a way to be able to catch errors. So you see our then block, everything that should have gone into this then block will now become, so let me write it out now. So you see, okay. So we now have, in this case, we're storing it in a variable called con, okay. And we say await, mongoose.connect. So you see, mongoose.connect, right? We are awaiting mongoose.connect, and then we have process .env.mongo URI. All right. So this waits for that request. And then the then is going to be fulfilled within this try block. Sorry. That means if there was a success, we can now do something below. All right. So in this case, console the log Mongo DB connected. All right. Whatever you want to put there. And then we're using the connection from that variable, all right, and the host, okay? So this would not run if this wasn't a success, all right? If an error is thrown here, the catch block will run. If you think about it, that's how this guy works too. If an error is thrown here, the catch block will run, .then would not work, all right? So .then is anything that would happen after the main request, all right? Then we'll put it after that request. Okay, but anything that comes here will be for error purposes. I mean, if there's an error that occurred inside this block, catch it here. And note, that has to be an error that is related with the asynchronous operation, all right? It will be cached here. So now we can now say console.log in case there was an error connecting to the database. We want to say error connecting to MongoDB, okay? And then error. So now I'm going to, as I code, so we'll say module.exports connect DB. So we're exporting that function, right, for use outside this file. Okay. So now let me just make something clear. For a long time in my programming journey, I did things I did not really fully understand. Okay, so it's okay. All right, so don't stay stuck on one concept that you're not getting. And that's why I'm trying to start creating like a guidebook for some very common operations in programs, so that beginners can just have the book, look at it, repeatedly do it, all right? And then you just know what you're doing. And if you're a curious person and you read, it begins to make more sense to you, okay? So, yeah. So what we're going to do next is we're going to define our models, okay? So now we're working on everything that has to do with our database. So have our models. I don't know if I can even get rid of this thing from my screen. Okay. So we want to create our models now. So we come in models. All right. So models help us to create the, tables in our database. All right. That's what models help us to do. So we can talk to our database and, you know, interact with the tables in our database. Okay. So let's go. So I want to create a model for users, all right? And I think that's the only model that we actually need. I'm going to say user.model.js. The reason why we are making use of this naming convention with our MVC, model view controller, all right? The reason why we're making use of this is because you can have user as a file name, user.js here. And then inside the controller, we can have user.js. Now, let me show you. Let me just show you practically so that it's not just theoretical. Okay, so we have user here, models, and we have here, we have user.js, right? There should be no conflict, of course, because these two guys, they're in different folders, right? But then for your developer experience, you find out that if this happens too frequently in your code base, you are going to not have a great experience. So for instance, if I say Command P, all right, it gives me the option of selecting files like this. This is just one very simple example. Now we see that we have two files here. One of them is saying user.js, the other one is saying user.js. Now I have to now take another step further to look at the file path. Now imagine that this file path is very long. We now have to look through the file path and determine which of the user.js you need. All right, you already see the problem. So imagine we had 6 user.js and we have to look into the file path of all of them to determine what they are. Okay, that would be very, very chaotic. So what we do is we name them with their folder. All right, so we say in this case user.model. This is a model.js. Okay, and here we would have said user.controller.js. Okay, so that's like the naming convention, right? Nothing too special. You can decide to not use it or make use of it. Okay. All right. So here we're going to be creating our model, but we start by first defining a schema. So I'm going to say mongoose equals require mongoose. All right. And then we need bcrypt here. Bcrypt. Require bcrypt. Okay. So bcrypt is going to be used for encoding our passwords, all right, and decoding the passwords. So we have to encode our passwords and store them as cryptographic strings, all right, not just plain text. Because you store it as plain text and your server is compromised, hackers will have access to your user's password, and this is one very basic security measure that we can do. All right, so we use bcrypt, and then we encrypt our passwords using bcrypt and also decrypt it using bcrypt. So as long as bcrypt, you used bcrypt to create that encoded string, you can also use bcrypt to decode it. All right, not really decode, to compare a plain string with the bcrypt string and know if they are the same. All right, so let's just proceed and we'll get there. So we're going to create a schema, okay, and we'll do new mongoose.schema. All right, and your schema is a class that requires an object or a function that requires an object. So I'm going to give it this object. So the object defines the structure of the data we'll be storing inside our database. All right. So the username, we're going to say that username has a type of string. And then it is required. So say required true. All right. I think I told you guys during the last class that if you have just one, one configuration, like say the type, you can do these brackets and just say string. Okay, so this works too. But then you see this commonly used. Right? So the next one is going to be email. I'm not taking too much. So type is string true, and then required is true. And the last one is going to be password. Okay, type is string, required is true. So that's our schema. So I've created the structure of our documents, the documents that will accept into that particular field. Okay, so the next thing to do is to write a hook. So I'm going to say user schema dot pre. Okay. So I'm saying that, you know, pre is before, post is after. Okay, so that's very useful. So I'll say before you make use of this schema to save any document, I want you to do something. All right, and that thing I want you to do would be inside this callback. Okay, so I'll pass next into the callback. So this is an arrow function. So I read it again. Before saving a document using this schema, right? So before saving documents into the schema, call this function. Okay, so what do I want to do inside a function? I want to say if this, that means that particular document that is modified, all right, password, okay, then next. As if that password field is already modified, then just go next. But if not, if that condition is not fulfilled, what do we want to do? We want to actually alter it. All right, so we're going to say bcrypt dot generate sort. This sort simply means how difficult do you want the password to be. All right, in terms of if somebody tries to break our password, to crack our password, how difficult do we want it to use? That's a salt. All right, so think of it like when you put too much salt in a soup, it becomes difficult to swallow, more difficult to swallow. So the higher the salt that you generate, the higher or the harder it is for somebody to crack the password. All right, the lower the salt that you put, the easier it is to eat the food. Okay, yeah. So and then again, we know that you don't want to, like, you don't want your food to be without salt. Okay, so if it is too low, it's bad. You want to be somewhere in the middle, and 10 is a very good number to make use of. Okay, and you should know that when trying to decrypt, even in your own server, if you have the salt is too high, it will be harder, right? Not really harder, it will take more time to compare, and decrypt. So anytime somebody is trying to log in, we know that we always compare, so it will take more time for that comparison to resolve. All right, so we want to use 10 because 10 is like very, very, very moderate. All right, so we see that we have an error here. The reason is because we're using a wait inside of a function that is not asynchronous. So we're just going to say async here, and that error should be away. Okay. So next, we're going to say this dot password, all right, should be equal to await decrypt dot hash. So now we're actually preparing the food. So there we just went to the market to buy salt. All right, salt that will be enough to cook the food. So now we're hashing it. We're doing the actual cooking. So you pass in the text that you want to hash, which happen to be the password, and then we use the salt on it. Okay. So now we have actually encoded our password string. So before the password is saved to the database, this will happen. Okay. So we do next. We have to call next because this is a middleware. All right. And whenever you make use of middlewares, you call next so that the next stuff in line in your server will pick up from there. All right. So that's it. So finally, we say module.exports should be equal to Mungo's model. We're exporting the model, and then user. Okay. So that's the name of our model. That's what this table will be called. So what Mongoose will do is that, or what MongoDB will do is that when it sees this name, it's going to turn it to all lowercase like this user and add S to it, right? Because it makes sense. Because this is like a table or a table that stores multiple values. Okay. So yeah, so we're going to do user like that. All right. So the next thing to do is to pass in the schema. All right. So we want to use this schema for it. And I want you guys to really think about this really well. If you are asking, how is this guy being used? Like, how is this guy being used? Yeah, it might be that you have not been following us. So we talked about objects. So this is an object. We're instantiating an object from a class, actually. That's why you see this new keyword, or from a constructor. Okay? So this is an object. And when you use dot in objects, right, what you're actually doing is you're calling something that is inside that object. So this pre happens to be inside this object, which is the same as this. All right. So when we actually call this pre function, we pass it a parameter and something happens to this schema object. But this code is actually dealing with this object. So when we pass this object into our model, we have actually made use of this. All right. So in case you were thinking of that, that's the explanation. Okay, so we export this and we move on to the next. So what's the next thing we want to do? All right, the next thing we want to do is to create our controllers. So we have the user controller already, but that's not the first controller that I want to create. So I'm going to rename it to for authentication. All right. So now let's go. So my authentication controller, I want to use bcrypt, all right, because I know that I'm going to be comparing strings here. So require, is that the correct spelling of require? I hope it is. Bcrypt. And then here, we're going to be making use of our JWT. So require JSON web token. Okay. And then we're going to use our model. So we're going to call it user equals to require where's our model? We go one step out of where we currently are and we search for model and then user model. Yeah, user model. See. Okay. So now we say async function HTTP login. Now you can decide to call this, just call this login. All right. No problem with that. But this is a convention that is used. So you can decide to adopt it or look for your own convention and apply. All right, so we know we want the request and the response. We know we're expecting the request and the response. So since this is an asynchronous function, when we're performing asynchronous operations, we have to try and cache in case an error occurs inside of it. So now we're going to say email password. We're taking our email and password from the request body. All right. So this is a login. When you're logging in, you use your email and password, and that's all we need. Every other thing you pass in, we would not use it, so we ignore it. So we just collect what we need, email and password. All right. And then we're going to find the user. So find user by email. So the user will be equals to await. So we're going to say user.find1. All right. And we'll pass in the email. Okay. So find one is going to find, one user using this filter object. And when you use this syntax, you are simply saying email. All right. So find one document that has an email field and the email field matches this email that the user passes in. All right, but then we're going to use the ES6 syntax. It looks cleaner. Okay. Now, if there is no user, if we don't see that user, we want to return rest.status 401.json. All right. And then we give a message invalid email or password. Now, the reason we're saying invalid email or password is because we do not want the person logging in to know what's actually wrong. All right, that's like a security measure so that you do not know, oh, it is the password, the email is correct, but the password is not correct, and then you know what to attack. We'll just tell you that, one of the required stuff for login is not correct. That's enough information for the user. Okay, so if it happens that there is a user, that means this if condition was not fulfilled, all right, then we're going to get to this point. So we say password, all right, and then const is match, all right, so wait, we'll say bcrypt.compare. So now I want to compare two things. The password that the user has passed in while trying to log in, and the password associated with the user, this user that we found from the database. Okay, so we'll pass in that and this, and bcrypt is going to compare both of them and see if, so I think how bcrypt works is that bcrypt is going to take this first parameter, convert it, all right, it will convert it to that cryptographic string using the same hash, and then to compare the two to see if they will be the same. And if they are the same, it means that, there's a match for the user trying to log in. So we go next. All right. The next thing we want to do is would say if there's no match, because there'll be no reason to proceed if there's no match, right? If there's no match, we'll return at this point and say rest the status, and then 401. All right, JSON, and also the same thing. We don't want to give them too much information, and we say invalid user, or let's say email or password. Okay, that'll be enough. Well, if this did not happen, that means there was a match, right? The program continues. Okay, and then now we create JWT payload. Okay, now we create this JWT payload and send it to the user, because this is going to be the user's token when trying to access protected route. And we're going to explain how that works. So I'll say const payload should be equal to user ID, user, right, dot ID. Okay, so what we're trying to send to the user, all right, is going to be, so what we're trying to use for our JWT will be the user ID. So I'll explain what's happening. Let me proceed. Okay, so now I will generate JWT. Okay, so here I'll say the token is equal to, so a lot of persons will call it access token. That's what you'll see mostly online. So let's call it access token. The access token will be JWT.sign. So I want to sign a payload using my signature, which is my secret. Your signature is your secret. Should be your secret, because anybody who has it will be able to withdraw from your bank. So that's exactly what's happening here. So let me explain what's happening. Now, when you create JWT, what you need to do is you need to provide data to that JWT. All right. And then you need to sign it. So that's what we're doing. So we're signing with our signature. Our signature is called our secret, our JWT secret. You can call it signature if you like, but secret is the term that is used within the ecosystem. All right. So you provide a payload for the JWT, and then you sign using your secret. Your secret should never be leaked. If your secret is leaked, anybody who has access to your secret, which is your signature, can decode your JWTs. Not really decode, actually. It can actually impersonate. Just like when somebody has your signature, they can impersonate you. All right. So if your secret is leaked, people can make use of that secret and impersonate you and sign JWTs for themselves. If they sign JWTs for themselves, it means that they can have access to your server. All right. So how does JWT work? So I'm going to take us to, I hope I shared this. Can you see my browser, everybody? Can you see my browser?
Yes, you can see.
So let's go to JWT.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just search JSON Web Token. So we'll come to this site and scroll down. This is an encoded JWT, and this is the decoded JWT. So this is the payload. You see the header of it. It has different sections. It has the header. That's the first part. You still have like a set of string, then dot, another set, then dot, another set. So the first part is the header. where the metadata is stored, right? And then you have data, which is the actual payload. So this payload that we're actually putting here is what you would see here. Okay, that's what you'll see here. And then we have the signature. Okay, so this would be your signature. So let's try something. I'm going to come back to this, right? I'm going to come back to this. When we generate a JWT, we're going to come back to this website and paste our JWT here to see what it will generate. All right, so let's go. So if after generating that JWT, right, the last thing we want to do is we want to actually put in some metadata. So we'll say this JWT should expire in 1 hour. It's going to be valid for just 1 hour. After 1 hour, the user would have to log in again, get a new JWT to keep working. Okay, so that is what we'll do. So finally, we're going to respond with JWT. All right, so we'll say rest.json access token. All right, so we'll respond with the access token to the user. Okay. If there was an error from any of the process within our try block, I want to catch it. I'm going to say console log. All right, error. We'll log that error. And then, so it's going to be ERR. Okay. And then we respond to the user because we don't want to leave them hanging. And this time something has happened in our server that we don't know, right? And it's not their business, not what it is. So we'll just say server error. Okay. So there you go. I think we have created our login controller. All right. A bit of over information. This thing is called controller because, so say module exports equals. So this one is called controller because it controls traffic between your view and your models. All right, so your route, when I say model now, you see model, we're making use of model inside of it, right? I'm making use of model. And the view in this case is the client, which is Postman, all right, which is JSON in this case. So it controls how we send data to the client and also how we interact with our database. So that's why it's called controller. It's the guy that controls how that dynamics work. All right, so there you go. The next controller that we want to create would be the user controller. So let's create our user.controller.js. Now I can do this from the terminal just so that a lot of persons know. So we say touch. Hey, I hope it's correct too, because these commands can be tricky. So I can say touch from here, and let me try. Touch controllers / user.controller. Why am I feeling that this will work? It worked. Nice. So controller.js. So you can create it from your terminal. In case you are that person who likes to stay on your keyboard and not use mouse too often, you can do everything in the command line interface. Okay. So here we're going to get our users model. So we require it and say models, or has to be in a string, models / user.model. Okay. So we have that. The point on it shows that our URL is correct. So we need an asynchronous function, async, ASYN. Async function, okay, and then HTTP register client or register user. All right, so we're gonna reg res and try catch. Okay, I'd like to try a catch. So user name, email, password, reg the body. So I want to notice how I read my code as if I'm telling a story. That's how you should write code. And that's how you get to understand what's happening. All right, so we're going to do a basic validation and we're going to improve it for production. That's why I put this here to do. So there are better ways to write what's it called now? Validation. So this is just a very basic validation. And anytime you're looking at this code, you should know that it's not foolproof. It's just for class purposes, all right? So we say if there is not username, right? Username is not set, or email is not set, when you're trying to register, we need all these guys. Because if you check our model, you will see that we do not allow any of them to be missing. So they are all required true. So within our controller, we have to check that all of them are provided before we proceed. Okay, so that's what we're doing. And if any of these fails to be present, we're going to return with an error. So we say res.status 400, that JSON. And we'll pass our JSON. Message, please provide all fields. Okay, there you go. So the next thing we want to do is to check for existing user. You know that you don't want to have two users with the same email, right? So we're going to go back to our model. We'll see that email should actually be unique. Sure. I think that's the syntax for it to, have I forgotten? No, I think I'm correct. That's the syntax for it. All right. So since it's unique, we want to be sure that before we save, all right, during registration, before we actually register the user, we want to be sure that we don't have a user with already existing email. So I'm going to say existing user equals to await user dot find. I call this user, so I'm going to call it user. Right? So I'll say user dot find one. All right, find one because immediately you see one user with that email, that's enough to return to us. Right? So we say if existing user, right, we want to return response.status 400. All right, and then we'll tell you that, man, sorry, email already exists. Mail. That's correct, though. It looks incorrect. That's correct. Email. All right, so that is it. I get rid of this if. Okay, but then if not, right, if there's no user, then why not create the poor users account and don't stress them. Okay, so what we're going to do is const user equals new user. All right, so we're using the model here now to create to prepare a new document or user. So username, email, password, all right, using what was passed in. Okay, and then we await user.save. So this is where we save it to the database. All right, we'll first prepare it and then we save. And after we have saved, what do? We respond to the user with success. Okay, so now we say rest.status 201 because that's document created. That's the meaning of that code. All right, and then we go message user created successfully. Okay, and next we'll say user. So we're passing the user back to the user after they have created. So we're going to say what we'll do is user. Is this correct? Let me try it. User dot. Will that work? Let's see. So I'm going to say saved user course await. Okay, and here I can make use of saved user dot mail, and then I'm doubting what I'm writing, but if it doesn't work, we'll come back to it later. So password will be saved user dot password, right? So this will do the job for us. And then we catch. If there's an error, say console.error, or you can just log. So that error will log it to the console. And then we have to give the user a response. Say 500 JSON. So we pass in the message and we say server error, right? So that is it. So I've created our register controller, right? And then we need another controller within the user controller. So all user controllers will be here. All right. So say async function HTTP get users. All right. So get users would actually access user database. So let's just say all right. So what we can do is we say const users equals to, this should be easy. With user.find, and then find everybody. Okay, so that's what's what happened there. And then we rest.json. Yes. Access granted. And respond to the user. Users. So this is chaotic, but I would do it like that and then we'll refactor. All right. So yeah, that is it. So I'm going to save that and let's see. Here I'm omitting the status code, right? So I could have said 200, but I think for every success, 200 will be the default status code. So I can omit it actually. Let's omit it in this case and see how that works out. So our module.exports, we're exporting everybody from this module. HTTP get users, HTTP register users. But I like to export in order, right? So I created that one first. I'll export it first for just a preference. All right. So next, we want to create our routes. All right. So we have two routes. One of them is the auth route, and the other one is the user route. I'm going to say auth.routes.js, following our naming convention. Okay? And then const express is equal to require express. And then I have need of my authentication. I have need of the login. All right. So I'm going to get my HTTP login function from controllers, auth controllers. Okay. And then auth router. So I'll be creating a router for auth. So I'll say express.router. All right. And now we can say auth router. We already know all this, right? Post/login. Okay. HTTP login. And now we can export module.export our auth router. So the next router will be user router. So I'm saying user.routes.js. So we're going to get our JWT because we need it here. Require JSON web token. Okay. And then I think I should separate. Let's separate this. Let's separate this. So in our user route, let me tell you how this user route will work. So the user route, when a request comes in the user route, right? depending on the endpoint that they are trying to access, we want to verify that they have permission, the proper permission to visit that route. All right. So because of that, we have to use a middleware. Okay. So this is where we actually create our middleware. So we're going to create our middleware, and we'll call it verify JWT. Okay, .js. So this is what we're going to make use of this, and verify JWT will be equal to press next. Okay, this is the middleware, don't forget. So what I want to do is auth header. I want to get the auth header. All right. So when the request is being passed to the server, there are headers that are included in the request. All right. So the client can decide to add different headers. Okay. Now for authentication, we actually make use of the authorization header. Okay. And a popular kind of token that is accepted with that header is called the bearer token. Okay, let's proceed. So I'm going to say request.headers dot authorization. So the user has to pass this. If they don't, we're going to catch them here. So we'll see if it wasn't passed in. So I meant to say exclamation mark. It wasn't passed in, or I want to check that the auth header has, as it starts with this string, because if it's a bearer token, it has to start with bearer and then space before the actual token. I want to see that in action very soon. Okay, so if there is no authorization header in the headers, then this would actually trigger. Okay, or if it doesn't start with bearer, we know that you're not passing a bearer token. So we're going to respond to you. Okay, appropriately. So we say rest status 41, which is unauthorized. Okay, but JSON. And we're going to give you the message saying on or authorized. All right. And that should do the trick there. So we proceed. If everything went well, we proceed to get our token. So we say token equals auth header dot split. We split here, we see space. So assuming that the auth header, which is this authorization, all right, has something like this. When we split, an array will be formed with these two, I would say these two parts of the string, because we are splitting at every point we see a space. So the space only exists here. So we're going to have two items in the string. One will be the bearer, and the other one will be this token. And this is the token that we actually need. So when we split with a space here, we're now going to say take the second item. 0 would have been the first, and 1 the second. Remember how we access arrays, okay? So that is it. So we'll get the token from it, and we have to check that token. To check the token, we do a try and catch block, because it's going to be an asynchronous operation. So what we do is we try, and you'll see this almost everywhere, decoded. We call the variable decoded, decoded JWT. So we say verify that JWT, all right? Verify that the token that was passed in was actually signed by us. So we use the secret, JWT secret. Are you seeing why your secret should not be exposed? Because anybody who has your secret can sign JWT with it. And if the server receives that JWT, the server is going to believe that it signed it himself, because that signature somebody else has impersonated. All right. So that's it. So say reg.user equals to decoded. So we're going to pass it into a user object in the request so that we can use it somewhere down the chain. All right. So we say res the status 401. If there was an error, it means that we could not grant you authorization. So we say unauthorized. All right. So finally, we module that exports the middleware. Okay, so verify GWT export. So now when we come to our router, is it user route? Okay, so when we come to the user route, we can now deal with these requests. So say const express require express, all right? And then we say const HTTP register. So that's the wrong naming format. So register user and HTTP get users. So those names are correct. Equals require. We're requiring them from controllers / user controller. Okay. All right. So next, we know we have need of our verified JWT. So we require it from middleware, verified JWT. And finally, we create our router, user router is equals to express router. All right. That's cool. So now we say user router dot post. So if the post request comes to /register, we want to use HTTP register register users or register user. And then if there's a get request to the user router and it's just /, it means they want to get all users. All right. So we use our verified JWT middleware and then before the controller. So if there's an error that occurs here, this would not run because the middleware will have to be passed first before we get here. All right. Okay, so that's a lot of code, you know. Exports equals, you see why they pay developers huge money because where is it? All right, so we export the user router and mind you, this code is fine, it's okay, but it's not really optimized. Like there's a lot of things that I wish I would change. Not that I wish that I would change if I was writing a production application. All right, but then if you bring all those complexities into teaching, especially at this early stage, people get really confused. All right, so you start from the basics. This still acceptable, all right? But then you should know that there are rooms for optimization, all right? So I'm going to write my app here. So this is like our app engine. This will handle all the requests actually. So express, getting express, and then we say user router should be equals to require, so I'll get routes / user the routes, all right? And then auth router require from routes, auth routes. So we get all those guys. And then we create our app. Anytime I create app, I usually feel sort of power because this guy has a lot of power. So app, we say app dot use. Of course, we want to process all the bodies to JSON. We know what this means, right? And then we say app dot use. Anything coming to user, let the user router handle it. Let the user routes handle it. All right, the app.use, anything coming to auth. All right, let the auth router handle it. And here we export app module that exports app. Oh, that's cool. So finally, we want to create our server. All right, so we come here at the root of our project and say server.js. I feel relieved. So const HTTP, of course, we know that we're making our HTTP server. So we'll do HTTP. And then we say we require app. That's going to be our handler, our server handler. Okay, so src/app. And then, of course, we need to connect our database. This is where we connect our database. And so src db, yeah, connect db. Okay. So we create a port variable. I'm going to say process.env.port. And the port. Or if it doesn't exist, we want to use 8,000 for our port. Now, for this to actually be possible, we have to make use of .env, all right? Because normally we have not created any port variable in our process.env. I can show you that stuff. Let me show you console.log process.env. I'm going to show you that. And let's run this code. Let's run node server, just this file, right? Node server.js. So this is our process.env. If you check inside it, you will not see anything called port. All right, process.env is just an object that has all the environment variables inside of it. All right, all the environment variable that belong to that process. So I'm going to clear, and let's now add. So let me just show you now. Process.env.port equal to 8,000. So we'll now print process.env. So if I print again, run that file again, node server, let's check if it is anywhere. So you see ports now. Are you seeing it now? All right. So what process.env module does for us is that it's going to look in for this file and take everything that is here and attach it to the process.env object. All right, so how do we make use of it? You just require it. You need no variable for it. Just say .env and then call config on it. All right, so now let's remove this and log process.env and see. So if I log process.env again by running this file, how sweet is that? So you see that now I have Bongo URI, port, and JWT secret. Okay, so it's not magic. That's what's happening behind the scenes. All right, so let's go. So now that we know how that works, I've configured .env with our project. So everywhere we are using process.env now has become valid. All right. So say const server will be equals to http.create server, and we're using app as our server engine. Yeah. So I want to create a function here, which is an asynchronous function. I'm going to say start server. That's what it is. Well, I can hear that guy asking me, why do we need this? Okay. There's one guy like that was like, if you don't answer me, I will arrest you. So I've checked all the tutorial. I did not see it. So I'll go and check. So we're doing this now, and that guy is asking me again, and he's saying, why do I have to create this guy for our listen? All right. So I see server running on port, okay. And just for fun, put 3 dots. So it looks like something hard or difficult. So now I'll now say start server. So I call this function. Now, everybody would agree with me that I can actually do this. Cut it, remove this guy, and put it here. I can do this. And it works, right? So why do I need that function to run it? I did that on purpose to show you that most times when you want to start your server, there could be more than just these two that you want to achieve before you start your server. So you could be loading data from one source into your database, right? You could be running a particular command, all right, that maybe needs to or has to do with setting up your server. For example, you want to spin up clusters. There are a lot of things that maybe when you want to do, because I've shown you that this is something that you can think of, all right? I think it will just come automatically to you that I can actually create a function and put all the processes I want to actually run for my server to start and then call the server, all right? So it might not make sense now, but when you get to that place where you know that, okay, starting my server is not as simple as, it used to be. There are some things that I have to do before I start my server. Then this will come in handy. Because without writing a function, some of these things will not work. And I know what I'm saying, but I can't explain it to you because experience will teach you. All right, but this is something that you can do. I just wanted to show you that. And even this app that we actually separated, let me even show you one reason why it was very good that we separated our app. Imagine that we want to release another version of our API. All right, we want to release another version of our API, version 2. If I had not separated app from here, what I would have done is, so we'll come into app now, all right? You see that all this content would have been in the server. You would agree with me because we had not separated app, all these things had to be in the server. So what I would do now is, because I now have a new version of endpoints, I will now have to come into all these routes. And mind you, I'm going to have so many routes, like so many routes. So I have to come into all these routes and say, and call them V1. V1. This is just for this file. I'll now go back to auth routes and say V1. Imagine that I have 20 routes in this file. I have to be giving all of them V1, 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 V1 to make them version 1 and I'll create version 2. But with what I've done, with that separation of concerns that I've done, I don't need to do all that. What I could actually do is to create another app file, all right, from this one, and you name that one version 1, all right, and version 2. So what will happen is that, so let me just do it so that everybody sees it happening. So I'm going to create another file and call it app v1. I can decide to even put it in a folder, which I think it will be best. So I can just call it, let me just do it here, which is just for example's sake, say v1.js. All right, so what will happen is that all these guys you see here will now go into that guy, right? And everybody here will now be our current version, which is version 2. So inside v1, so if I go back to my server, I just need to say that app should be coming from v1. So you see this app now should be coming from v1. Let's v1, right? And then I'll just call this v1. Very small refactoring happening, v1, and come here and change this guy to the new app. So you see that every other guy before now has become v1. This has become v2. All right. Or another thing I could have done is just come here to the routes. So you see at this point, right? At this point, I could just say v1, v1. This is like one basic way. All right. And what happens is that when somebody accesses v1/user, it will take them to this router. And somebody accesses v2/user to take them to this router. All right. So if you actually take time to think about it, you understand what I'm trying to explain. Because I have separated concerns, right, it will now be easy for me to actually configure the server the way I want. Now, this is just one use case. There are other use cases. When I want to write tests, right, I can write tests against my app router. All right. So yeah, experience is going to teach you more of that. So separation of concerns is very important. So I hope I've not broken my code at some point. Okay, so I think that we're done with this server. So let's start our server, moment of truth. We're going to do npm run watch because we want to use node mon. So if I run, right, so correct, because we have no Mongo URL or URI. So you see that our server refused to connect. So now we need a server URL, and I'm not going to use Atlas. You can use Atlas if you want, but there's MongoDB Compass that you can install on your computer for local servers. All right. So now I'm going to connect to my local cluster. Yeah, there you go. So I'm going to delete authentication demo because I already had it before. So I'm going to delete it, drop that database. All right. And so I'll take this connection string, copy connection string, and then I'll go back to my app, to my .env. So Mongo URI will be that connection string. Then I have to put the name of my database here. So I'm going to call it authentication underscore demo. Okay. And then port 8000. And my JWT secret, any string you like, but make sure it's secure. You can put your name or you can use anything, but it should be secure. All right. So I'm just going to type in any gibberish here. All right. And then use it as my secret. So this will be my signature to sign my JWTs. So having done that,
Sorry, please. How did you get your Mongo URI? I didn't see that part. I don't think it displayed on the screen.
oops. Okay, so it means I have to share again. So let me share. I don't know. Let me share. So So guys, confirm that you can you see it now?
Yes, I can see it.
Can you still see can you see the coding editor?
Yes, I can see the editor now.
All right. Okay, great. So this is MongoDB Compass, all right, is installed on my machine. So I can start a server locally, like I can start a database server locally, just like you do with your PHP, right? What is it called? XAMPP, okay? But this one is just for database. So you install MongoDB Compass, Community Edition, because it's free, and you should be able to start a server. I'm gonna somebody trying to say something.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so this is my connection string. I have to connect. Let me do that again. How do I stop this server? So I think I'm gonna come here and say disconnect, right? Yeah. So MongoDB, this is the string, this is the connection string, right? So I have to add the name of the database here, authentication, all right, demo. That's what I call it. So I'm going to connect, and now I'm connected to it. So I can now click here and say copy connection string. Okay, so now I have the string. I go back here and I paste. Okay, so there you go. So now we run our server npm run watch. Hopefully there should be no error. And truly there was no error. So we're connected to localhost, which is the server, localhost. And our app is running on this port. All right, so what I could do is, and I don't know if I have enough time to really explain all these things. Do I have time? Okay, so I have until 1. Okay. Let me try. I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try. This might take another 30 minutes. Because I see that a lot of persons, maybe it's network share, but it can happen like that. It can be a lot to take in. So for those that are still here, let me just explain how this works. So I'm going to share my entire screen. And so let's make use of our client. So usually your client would be a browser. That's a user trying to, maybe a front-end engineer trying to consume your endpoint. But because we don't have a front-end engineer now, we're going to use Postman or Thunder client, right? So those are other types of clients that you can use to connect or talk to databases, okay, or endpoints. So I'm going to use Postman. Postman is very popular. I've been using Thunder clients until now, but there are some things I want to show you on Postman, and that's why I'm choosing Postman, right? Because it's going to be very crucial. So let's start. I'm going to do something. So you can install Postman in VS Code if you like. All right. A lot of persons like their Postman separate. Why I like to use it from VS Code. So Postman, and then you should see Postman. All right. Install. Hi, there's somebody there. Your video is interrupting our class. Please mute your mic. All right. So we have Postman, and you can install it. After you have installed Postman, it should appear here. All right. That's part of the extensions that you have. So I'm going to click on this and choose a workspace. You might have different workspaces, just choose one of them. So I'm going to use this workspace and I want to create a collection. So a collection is simply like a project, right? It's just like a folder. You're creating a folder in your system. So I'm going to create a folder for this our project. I'm going to call it, I'm just going to call it authentication demo. All right, that's what I'll call it. And I click on that collection and we have this interface, okay? And this is going to work almost the same with any version of Postman you're using, so you don't have to be afraid of that or concerned about that. All right. So now I can have different environments. All right. There is dev environment, there is prod environment. Okay. So let me show you what that means. So first of all, I'm going to delete. How do I delete dev now? So I'm going to delete this environment. Okay. So let's say we don't have any environment at this point, right? We can actually run code. So let's try. So I'm going to add a request to my collection. I say add request, and we're going to call this request. Let's call it get user. Users, all right? So this is going to be a get request to local/user, all right? And if we run this, authorized, because we're not authorized, right? We don't have what it takes to log in to actually access that user. So I have to log in first to be authorized. So now let's log in. So I'll change this to a post, or let me leave this guy like this and create another request. So I'll say add request and I'll call this login, right? So and this will be post and it's to go to auth/login. So I'm going to save that. And I need a body for my request, JSON, and it should have username, email and password. I think email and password. So I'm going to say email hot@gmail.com, password 12345, and then put my comma here, of course. Save. So now if I send this request, what happens is invalid email or password, because there's nobody like this existing in our database. So our server is working correctly. So I'm going to say add another request, and this will be for register. I'm going to say register, register. And then we're going to do localhost user register. Okay, save. And to register, we need a body. And it's going to be raw JSON. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this login code, put it here. And we need one more thing, username. I think it's username. The username is going to be Austin. Okay, we'll see. So now if we register, let's register. Register. Not found. User/register.
Should
Yes.
register be get?
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. Post. Yeah. So I'm gonna send, and it says server error. Why? Let's check. It says this dot is modified is not a function. Okay, that's a concern. So let's check. I called it. Oh my God. So let's see. We're looking for the model. That's our pre-hook. So that's our pre-save hook. So go to our model and it said this dot is modified is not a function. How come? How are you not a function? Explain to me in no less than 50 words how you are not a function. I put it to you that you're a function. That is modified is not a function. Wow. So let's see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out. So let's debug. Okay. Pre-save. Am I correct? So let's do something. Console.log. This. Let's first log this first. All right. So let's run our register again. So register. And this is an empty object. But we passed in the body. Let's check what's happening here. Our model. Let's go to our model again. Check username, email, password. All right. Now let's go to the controller. User controller, right? Register, use rector body. So I'm going to also the log request body rec.body. I think that actually passes. So let's go. So there's a body, right? There's request body. Yes, passed. Let's come back here. Register where DAO. So I'm looking for this model. Okay. User schema pre-save. This is very looks far-fetched because what could be the problem? Okay, so this is a very sweet way to show you why it's good to understand syntax. All right, so what's happening here is this. Arrow functions do not have this keyword in them. All right. I'm not sure there's a way I would have searched the internet to solve this problem. Arrow functions don't have this keyword inside of them. So I'm saying this dot is modified. It's not going to work, right? For this to actually work, we need to use the function syntax. So if I use the function syntax, let's try again. So I'm going to, let's first of all remove, let's look for the register user controller, remove this. And let's try to register again. You see that it already exists. So it has been saved in our database. Let's delete it. Let's delete that user. So the save worked. So I'm going to delete this. All right. And then I'm going to go back to here and let's try. So if I run this, you see that the user was created and everything worked well. If you check here, you see that this is now this and it's correct. All right. So if I go back here, where are you? Model, I cannot bring back this our code. Because if you check now, you see that I commented the path, the part of this work that does the encryption, right? I commented it out. So if you check, our password is stored in plain text. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's not what we want. So I'm going to delete this once again. And let's try again now. Register. If I run this, it says email already exists. For where? So let's check. Email does not. So I'm going to delete this. Come back here, delete this. All right, so let's do that again. So I'm going to run this and you see user created, but now you see that our password is now what? Hashed. So I told you, remember I told you that I did something chaotic, right? That's returning the password to the user. Okay, so this is not good. Shouldn't return passwords to your front end. All right, but then just to show you that this is working. So if I go to our, now that we've registered, right? If we log in, let's try to log in. So if I log in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? You see that we'll not get an access token. I told you that this access token will be returned. So if I copy this token and go back to this site, let's paste this token here. Now you see that we now have the user's ID, the expiration date. So if you point on it, you see that's Tuesday, May 28th. Today, 1 hour from when it was created. All right, that's what we specify. Okay, and then you see this user ID. If we go to our database and check, so let's refresh this and check the ID. What's your ID? 6655 and ends with DD3. We come here, you see 6655 ends with DD3. All right. So that's something that you should know, that the things you store in your JSON web token are very important. If you store your password inside here, it will be seen. So a lot of times what developers do is that, what beginner developers do is that they return. So let's go back to login now. Let's go back to login control, auth controller login, right? So at this point, where they are signing with the payload, what they do now is that they pass a complete user object in this payload. So it will now, if I did something like this now, user, what I've done is that I've used this entire user that was gotten from the database. I've used it to sign my token. Some persons do this. What will happen is that, and beginners truly. So what will happen is that all the user object is going to be in the payload, and you're using that payload to form your JWT. So if somebody takes hold of your payload and goes to this site, they can decode and see your entire payload, see the user's password and every other sensitive information that you have stored there. All right. The part that is not accessible, they can't access your secret, of course. All right, they cannot access your secret. That's going to be hidden away. But then all these other parts are going to be accessible. So you want to be careful what you use when signing your payload. All right, when signing your JWT, you want to be careful the payload that you use. So I'm going to take you back to how it was. And then let's try something. So now that we have logged in, so we logged in successfully, right? How do we now get users? If I try to get users like this, I'm logged in, but if I try to get users, it still says unauthorized. Why is that? The reason is because you have to provide that token. So I'm going to copy this token from here, all right? And I'm going to provide it in my authorization header. Remember, so if we go to JWT middleware, remember that we check the authorization header, right, for bearer token. So if I go back here, or now, get users, authorization, I would say type. What type of authorization? Bearer. So it's a bearer, not basic, sorry, bearer token. All right, and I paste the token here as the value, save. Now watch. If I try to get users, I know it's taking long, so there should be something wrong in our endpoint. So let's check what's there. So let's go back to get users, user model, no, user controller here, get users. Well, there seems to be nothing wrong with my code, at least at this point. HTTP get users. So what I'm going to do is, there seems to be nothing wrong, right? Is there anything wrong? So let me set the status 200 in case that happens to be part of the problem. So let's go back to get users and run it again. Okay. Now this is creepy. Okay, so let's go back and check. Users controller, HTTP get users, right? So let's go to this app.js / user router. And in my user router, verify HTTP get users. Okay. So let me go back again to app / user, right? user router. And in my user router, I've said that this should take us to this. So I think there's a problem here. The problem has to be here, and the problem is that I failed to call next. All right, so you should always call next. Okay, so we go back again and try, it should work now. So I'm going to click on get users and click here, and it works. All right, so it shows us the error. Says rest the status 200. So rest is not defined. So let's go back to user controller. And we forgot to rest. Very silly. All right, so now we'll go back here, register. So get users and click, and it works. Access granted, and you have your user. So this is another problem. Password is being returned again. So what I would do is I'll go back to my controller, and I will say that when you find the user, I do not want you to return password. So return every other thing minus password. So if I come back here to get users and send, you see that everything is being returned without password. A lot of time you see that this guy also will be cleared out. So you can actually still add this to the list of stuff that you don't want to be returned. And it won't be returned. Please, if your mic is on, please turn it off. Check your mic. Check your mics, guys. All right. Okay. So I think I've come to the end of today's class because of time, actually. So I wanted to show you how you can automate this process. So you don't need to, let's say, for instance, for get users, I have to go and copy this from my login route. So it means that if I have 200 routes, every time my token expired and I logged in again, I have to copy this token and use it for all the routes. And when you are developing like in a large scale, you are going to be calling many routes. All right. So copying this token every time to every route would not be efficient. So there's a provision for that, right? In Postman, I hope I can do this within 8 minutes. So in Postman, you can click on environment, create an environment. I'm going to create an environment and I'll call it dev. All right. Most times you have dev, test, and prod environments because they will have different variables. But I can't go into that because of time. So your variables are going to be stored here. So we can call this variable access token. And then put the value here. All right. So anytime we're developing using this environment, if this environment is selected, our programs are going to have access to this access token. Okay. So I'm going to copy this access token from here now like this, and I'll put it in this environment. I'll put it here, the value of it here. So now we have that. So if I come back to this endpoint, I can now say authorization inherit from parent. All right. And I'll select my environment. Ensure you select the environment, dev environment, inherit from parent. All right. So everybody inherits their token from parent. And this guy that is currently getting it manually, I'm going to change this to inherit auth from parent. So it will inherit from the environment, right? Inherit auth from parent. And then I go to the parent. Who is the parent actually we're referring to? Is this collection. All right. So in this collection, we're going to say authorization should be bearer auth because the parent has to specify bearer auth. And then the value should come from the environment variable called access token. All right. So with what we have done now, anytime you log in, you just need to copy the access token from here, right? Go to the dev environment, the dev environment, and then that is where you should put the variable. So we go to the dev environment, and so I'm going to click on it, dev environment, and we're looking for variables. Where are thou? I thought it was open somewhere. So I'm going to click. I was clicking the wrong thing. So you click this eye icon. Okay. So I'm going to click on it, and then you see that we can now come and paste it here. All right. So since this parent is getting it from that environment variable, every other person, you see all these guys are within this parent now. So all these guys are just inheriting auth from parent, and that would work. Now I come here and also get users. My get users route still works. Okay. So this is still manual, but it's just like you just need to do it once and it runs everywhere. But then you can also make it dynamic. So it has to happen by itself. So you come to the login route and then you see test. So you go to test, right? So you read this: test scripts are written in JavaScript and are run after a response is received. So what do I want to do here? I want to say const, because this is JavaScript, right? I want to say const JSON data equals pm.response.json. So I'll convert the response to JSON. And then I'm going to say pm.environment.set. So I want to set an environment variable here, access token. So I want the access token to be JSON data dot access. Okay, so in your spare time, you can go and look at it more and to make more sense. So what I'm doing here is this: I take the response from this request, right, and I convert it to JSON. Okay, and then that converted JSON, I'm going to look for access token inside of it. So you see that this will be the response, and you convert it to JSON, you're going to have a key called access token. So that JSON, I access the access token from it, and I store it in this environment variable. That's it. So every time I log in, right, you are going to see that. So if I log in now, you see that the access token changed, right? You see it ends with ZJIEY. Let's go to the dev environment and check what the value is. Check now. ZJIEY. Let's log in again. I log in again, send. It has changed again. S5RSO, I think so. And if you go back to the dev environment, let's check what the value is. S5RSO. All right? So that's better. So every time your token expires, you just come here and log in. All your children routes or the child routes are going to have access to that variable. Okay, so that's how you can automate Postman to do the work for you. All right, so we have just 3 minutes left, and the next instructor would need to use this link. So thank you guys for your time. I can take one question if I go. One question, just one. All right, so I see that there are no questions. Please follow me on LinkedIn. The step-by-step guide for what I just did today is already ready, and I'll be posting it on LinkedIn soon so that you can grab it, have it by your side while you go through the videos, and everything will make sense to you. So thank you so much for your time. Have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.